Boring meetings. Like that's not what we want to be accomplishing. We want to be driving the business forward, but it does require that we have effective meetings. One of our core tenets is you've got to get your leadership team in the same room 52 weeks a year to really build and execute a strategic plan that's going to outperform the competition and make your business one that can change the world around it. So how do we do that? Well, we have to have a structure. So we're big fans of agendas, and there's 4 basic agendas that Axiom uses in its work with clients. There's a weekly, a monthly, a quarterly, and an annual. And it's pretty straightforward. Every agenda has these basic elements on it. There's a few missing from some of them, and that's what we're going to cover. So just very quickly, mission moments, where you call out people in the organization who have been living out your values and you recognize them. So we share mission moments pretty much at the front end of every single meeting. That's how we start. Builds morale, gets people excited, gets them in a positive frame of reference, and we're doing what leaders ought to do, which is encourage, exhort, and empower those that we lead. So that's mission moments. Call out the people who are doing a great job carrying your culture. Then we get into updates and to-dos. These are bullet points. This is not you talking about everything that's on your to-do list. And you also need to make sure that you're thoughtful about things that would help other people in the company to know, but keep it succinct. We're talking about 5 to 10 minutes to go around the table and share updates. And we also review our to-dos from the prior meeting. That's very important. That creates an accountability. So if there was something discussed in the last meeting that required action that got recorded, we're reviewing that list today. We're providing some accountability. And on to-dos, all we want to know is it could be 3 answers. It could be done, it could be not done, or it could be not done and I have an issue that we need to address later. So keep it short and sweet. Again, to-do should take no longer than 2 or 3 minutes. Then we get into the weekly scorecard. This is something we build for all of our clients because we want to measure weekly operational performance. I'm not going to get into that a ton. We already covered a video on weekly scorecards, but we're going to spend a little bit of time reviewing that. Anything that needs to get our attention might fall down to the issues time. On a weekly basis, we're not going to have financials, so we're going to skip over that. Priorities update, we've already talked about 90-day priorities and dominoes. So this is how are you doing? Is there anything in there that's creating an issue for you that you need the team's help on? Again, another touch point for accountability. And then we get into the main point of the meeting. If you're going to get your leadership team in the same room for 90 minutes a week, which is pretty much a minimum in my view, then you ought to be spending 45 to 60 minutes of that time actually working on the issues in the business and accomplishing things. And that's what happens in Issues, Insights, and Actions. We raise an issue, we figure out what kind of insights we can gain from discussion, research, bringing data to the table, and then we take action. And sometimes we can resolve that issue in a week. Sometimes it might take a couple of weeks. There's a to-do. Somebody's got to work something out, got to get something done. Then we'll come back the next week and see if we can resolve that issue. That's all in persistent issues tracking, which was the previous video to this one. And then we wrap up by reviewing new to-dos. Hey, you said you were going to do this. Again, that gets written down so that we can provide accountability, and we adjourn the meeting. Now, on a monthly basis, it looks pretty much the same, except on that week that represents a month end, you're going to be reviewing financials because you're going to have financials closed out. The big difference is when we get to quarters. And the quarters, we're going to skip the priorities update because we're going to do a priorities workshop where we do an after-action review on your last quarter's priority and we set your next quarter's priority. And we do that for the team. Usually when Axiom is doing those, that there's a fair amount of discussion with the CEO, general manager a week or 2 out about what the priorities need to be going forward. Are there any guide rails or are there any major initiatives that we really need specific members of the leadership team to be working on? And then when we get to the annual, it looks a lot different because you're together all day. So we're going to spend the first part of that day looking back, the next part looking forward. We're going to set some wildly important goals tied to our core strategy and before we move into that 90-day priority workshop, because the most important part, again, is having everybody leave that room every 90 days knowing what their job is for the next 13 weeks. So don't make it more complicated than it needs to be. It's 4 simple agendas. The hard part is being disciplined about getting that team in the room every single week. That's why we call it Agenda 52. You have to execute 52 times a year.